Rank 1, bedroom guitarist. The thing you picked up to escape the house became the only thing keeping the house alive. Your father is gone. Your mother works the diner in the morning and the laundry at night and comes home after your sister is already asleep. Your sister is 9. Her medication costs $340 a month. In Aberdeen, that is enough to make a family desperate. You are 13 when you pick up the guitar. You are 14 when you understand that getting good at it is not a dream. It is the only thing in the house that might change anything. Nobody else knows that yet. Very soon the house does. Rank 2, local scene kid. It is a Thursday afternoon in November, and the garage is cold in a way that the space heater at the back wall does not fix, only argues with. There are 3 people in it. You know 2 of them. The third one you will know for the rest of your life, which is not something you think about on a Thursday in November when you are 16 and the space heater is losing. You have been playing alone in this garage for 2 years. The guitar is the one thing that responds to you directly, not with words, not with demands, just with sound that changes based on what you put into it. You have never performed for anyone who wasn't already in the room by accident. 6 months ago, someone knocked on the side wall. He lived on the far end of your street, heard the guitar through the wall, wanted to know what you were playing. He is the kind of person who listens without needing to fill the silence afterward. When you play something unfinished, he doesn't suggest how to finish it. He just waits to hear what you decide. You have not had many people in your life who do that. The second person came through him 3 months later. A year older, already out of school, works the auto parts store on the main road. He arrived with a drum kit in pieces in the back of a van he owns outright, which at 17 feels like a specific kind of adult. He set it up in 40 minutes without asking where anything should go. He suggested the Thursday schedule before there was anything to practice. He is the one who will always suggest the schedule for as long as there is one. The 3 of you play for 2 hours. What you produce is loud and unfinished and more honest than anything any of you has made alone. The first bandmate stays after the second one leaves. He sits in the garage while you work through things that are not yet songs. He doesn't suggest anything. He doesn't offer a direction. He just stays, which is its own kind of statement, and which you will not fully understand for another 3 years. What the first bandmate brings to the room is not easily named. He is not the most technically capable person in it. What he has is a quality of attention, the kind that makes you play differently because someone is listening rather than waiting for their turn. When you hit something true, something that sounds like what you actually meant, you can tell by the way he goes still, not approval, recognition. You have not had that before from anyone who wasn't already obligated to give it. The second bandmate brings something else entirely, and showed up the following Thursday with one. He is the one who tracks the set list, books the next room before you finish the current one, and knows without being told when a song is ready to play for someone outside this garage. His competence is not separate from his care. It is the form his care takes. Your mother comes home at 11. She walks through the garage to reach the kitchen. She doesn't stop. She doesn't say anything about the noise or the hour. She goes straight to bed. The room works. What you don't know yet is what happens when the room starts working too well. Rank 3. Opening act nobody asked for. The sister's next treatment cycle costs $1,020. Your mother's second job disappears in February. Too many missed shifts. No conversation. Just a final paycheck in the mail. The first job begins to slip in March. The household is now running on one grocery store paycheck and whatever the band produces from shows, which in the first 4 months of the year totals $310. You send a demo tape to 6 addresses, which means it doesn't register as an opportunity. It registers as unfamiliar, which in this industry is the same as a no. They don't tell you what to change. They don't suggest another door. They just don't open. The guitar that started as escape is now the only thing standing between your sister's treatment and a gap nobody else can fill. That is not a metaphor. That is the number. And the number doesn't care whether you are ready. You play 3 shows that spring. A bar in Olympia that pays in drink tickets. A venue in Tacoma that pays $50 flat. A basement in Seattle that pays nothing but has the right people in it. The crowds are small and largely there for something else. You play them the same way regardless. The second bandmate keeps the schedule. He books the rooms, loads the equipment, drives the routes, tracks what each show costs against what it returns. The return is poor. He tracks it anyway, without complaint, because knowing the number is better than not knowing it, and because he understands that the shows are not yet the point. The shows are practice for when the shows become the point. The The first bandmate doesn't ask questions about the urgency. He shows up Thursdays. He plays. He stays after the second bandmate leaves and sits in the garage while you work through things that aren't yet songs. He makes the room feel like the work is worth doing without ever saying so. You have not told him about the $1,020 or the missed shifts or what happens if the next treatment cycle can't be funded. You have not told him because telling him would require you to say out loud what you already know, which is that the band is no longer just a band. It is the only financial instrument the household has. You suspect he already knows. He has a way of knowing things he hasn't been told. The demos go nowhere. The house is running out of time. You stop waiting for a door to open and start building a room behind the wall. Rank 4, cult band. You record in a warehouse the second bandmate's uncle owns on the edge of town. It sits empty 3 days a week and has a loading dock with decent acoustics. 6 weekends, February through March. The engineer costs $600. Pressing 1 Zarazone units costs $900. Distribution across the Pacific Northwest, postage, phone calls, gas, costs another $600. Total just under $4,400, assembled from a savings account, the second bandmate's reserve, and a loan from his older brother who asks no questions and expects repayment by the end of the year. The sister's treatment deadline is 11 weeks out when recording finishes. The record is pressed in April. The second bandmate distributes it personally, routes planned on graph paper, stacks dropped at record stores in Aberdeen, Olympia, Tacoma, Seattle, radio stations served with a typed one-page fact sheet. Not a press kit, a fact sheet. There is a difference, and he understands it. The mainstream doesn't move. The mainstream never moves first. What moves first is smaller and more specific. People who grew up in towns like yours, in houses like yours, who hear the record and recognize something in it that no prior record has named with the same precision. Not because it sounds like what they already know, because it describes what they already know with an accuracy nothing else has managed. College radio in Olympia first, then Seattle, then down the coast. By the end of the first month, 400 units have moved through the routes planned on graph paper. The sister's treatment is funded. 1 sentence, no ceremony. During recording, the first bandmate misses 1 full session. His reason involves a car that broke down 2 hours away and a phone that ran out of battery. The logistics are plausible. The second bandmate listens to the explanation and takes slightly longer than usual to respond. You record the missing parts without him. He comes back the following weekend and lays everything down in a single afternoon without discussing the absence. The second bandmate raises it once in the parking lot after the session. 1 sentence. You respond with 1. Neither of you pushes further. You leave it where it landed and get in your separate cars. That is the first time you notice the second bandmate watching the first bandmate in a way that is different from how he watches everything else. More careful, more frequent, like someone who has already started preparing for something he hasn't named yet. The record works. The problem is that working changes the room. Rank 5, signed artist. The labels call in the 6th week. Not the offices that return nothing when you sent the demo, though some of those call too, but larger ones, with larger reach and clearer ideas about what the record could become with their machinery behind it. You take the meetings. You sit across from people who have run this negotiation 10,000 times and who are accustomed to the other side of the table arriving grateful. You do not arrive grateful. You arrive with 14,000 units already moved through infrastructure you built yourself. The sticking point is the masters. They want them. You don't move. The conversation goes 3 rounds over 2 weeks. At one point, the label's representative stands up and says they are done, that no artist at your level holds masters in a first deal, that this is not how it works, that they have other options. You say you understand and wait. He sits back down. The deal closes on your terms. Distribution infrastructure, $180,000 advance, royalty structure that takes 3 drafts to settle. Masters stay with you. Options on future records do not extend beyond the first. The second bandmate handles the paperwork without drama. He says the right things. He is present in all the visible ways. But he leaves early, before the food arrives, with a reason that is brief and doesn't quite land. The second bandmate watches him go from across the table. Neither of you says anything about it that night. You have both been watching him for long enough that a dinner exit does not require discussion. It just gets added to the count. 3 days after the contract is signed, the first bandmate doesn't answer his phone. For 3 days. He comes back on the 4th with a plausible story. The second bandmate had already covered for him with the label's A&R contact, told them he was sick, handled the rescheduled introductory call, managed the follow-up email, without telling you he'd done any of it. You find out later, from someone else, the machine is running. One of the 3 people who built it is already somewhere the machine can't quite reach. Rank 6, Rockstar. The second record moves 680 0 units in its first week. The tours sell out in under an hour. None of this is the point. You hold that distinction clearly and it changes nothing about how the machine runs. What a sold-out arena feels like from the stage is not what anyone watching assumes. You are standing in front of 18,000 people in a city you first heard of from a map, and the dominant experience is not connection. It is distance. The gap between the scale of the room and the interior state of the person at the center of it. The crowd is real. The noise is real. What is not real is the assumption that any of it reaches you the way it appears to from the outside. Your stomach has been a problem since you were 15. A chronic condition resistant to 4 approaches across 3 years. 2 did nothing. 1 made performing impossible. The 4th reduced the pain by roughly 60%, which still leaves 40% on stage every night. By the second tour, it is a nightly fact the schedule does not account for. The opioids come through a prescription from a doctor in Los Angeles who understands touring without needing it explained. The relief is complete in a way nothing prior has been. You know immediately what you are building. You keep going. You are famous, in pain, and no longer certain the person beside you wants to stay alive. The first bandmate across this period, late to soundcheck for the 3rd time in 2 months, different city, different excuse. A show in Chicago that is technically correct and emotionally somewhere else entirely. You see the second bandmate's face across the stage during the second song, and you don't need him to explain what he's seeing because you are seeing the same thing. A conversation on the tour bus outside Denver that starts as an observation and ends without landing anywhere. You sit with it for 3 days, then the next city, then the next show, then the city after that. The thing that needed to be addressed keeps not being addressed. The schedule makes this easy. The schedule was not designed to make this easy, but it does. The second bandmate has not slept a full night in a month. He has been managing the first bandmate's gaps, sound checks, press appearances, legal check-ins, without raising it with you, without raising it with anyone. He absorbed the problem and kept moving. You know this not because he told you, but because you started watching him the way he watches the first bandmate. And what you see is someone running a weight that is not his to carry and carrying it anyway because the alternative is that it falls. The tour ends. The bus empties. Everyone goes somewhere. The first bandmate goes somewhere that is not home. You find out later where. By then it is already the next thing you have to manage. Rank 7, Fallon Rockstar. The second bandmate calls on a Tuesday morning in March. 1 sentence. That is all it takes. What the first bandmate was, not as a musician, not as a name, but as a person in a room, is what you carry now in the place where he used to be. He was the one who knocked on the wall because he heard a guitar and wanted to know what it was. He was the one who stayed after everyone else left, who sat in the cold garage while you worked through things that weren't yet songs, who made the room feel worth being in without ever saying so. He was the only person who heard you play alone and chose silence over comment. You have not had many people in your life who did that. You now have none. The second bandmate comes over that afternoon. He doesn't say the right thing because there is no right thing. He stays for 2 days without being asked. He answers the phone when the label calls. He handles the public statement without involving you in the wording. He doesn't leave until you tell him he can. That is the most significant thing anyone does in this period. Not a gesture, not a statement. Presence that doesn't require you to manage it. The opioids are still present during all of this. Stopping means the pain comes back without anything between you and it. It means performing through a condition that has been fully managed and will now not be. You know exactly what the drugs are doing. Stopping is not an upgrade. It is a trade. You stop. He is gone. You are still here. That has to mean something. The withdrawal takes 11 days, 3 shows cancelled. The label gets an explanation that is accurate and incomplete. The second bandmate handles the rescheduling, the press, the label calls, the follow-up emails. He does this without waiting to be asked and without telling you afterward what it cost him, which is the same way he has handled everything since the parking lot conversation after the missed recording session. The physical cost of those 11 days is recorded only in what you don't say about them afterward. That is everything. Rank 8, rock legend. The studio in Seattle is not the garage. Better equipment, better acoustics, a proper console, a room built for the purpose. What it does not have is the specific quality of air that existed in a cold garage on a Thursday afternoon when 3 people were making something nobody outside a 3-street radius would ever hear. You cannot replicate that. You work around it. The second bandmate is across the console every day. He sets up without being asked where anything should go. He is the last person who remembers the warehouse sessions in February, the graph paper routes, the first show in Olympia where the crowd came for someone else. When you bring in something new and ask whether it is honest, whether it is true to what the work has always been trying to do, he is the one who answers. He does not always agree. When he doesn't, he says so in one sentence and waits to hear what you decide. You have had him since a cold garage in November when the space heater was losing. That has not changed. The third record takes 8 months. It is described by the people who review it as grief that doesn't perform grief, which is the most accurate thing anyone says about it publicly. It moves 410,000 units in its first month. Not a comeback, a continuation. You note the number and move on. During a television interview that year, you are asked directly about dependency and treatment and what you think the system gets wrong. You don't give a personal confession and you don't give a speech. You describe what happens to people when the only available response to their condition is punishment rather than treatment. What that gap produces. Who ends up inside it? The clip travels further than the broadcast did. People who expected a different kind of answer don't know what to do with it. People who needed to hear it do. The second bandmate watches it from across the room. When it ends, he says one thing. You don't respond. He was in the room when the original problem started. He knows the distance between that and this better than anyone who will ever write about it. You make the record. He sets up. He waits to hear what you decide. 2 people where there used to be 3. The room holds. Rank 9, the cycle. You stop touring in the spring. No announcement. People read it as exhaustion or decline or both. It is neither. You go quiet because quiet is the only thing the machine cannot replicate or schedule or sell back to you. You have watched it shrink artists for 2 decades by keeping them moving, releasing, available, legible. The name gets heavier when it isn't everywhere. You learned this by watching what happened to people who didn't learn it in time. What the quiet costs is harder to name than what it produces. You stop sitting in a booth at 2 a.m. working on something until it becomes exactly what it needed to be. That part of the work goes somewhere you don't visit often. When you do, you leave again quickly. The absence is not neutral. You carry it the way you carry anything you've decided not to put down. The second record is still moving. The third record's numbers hold. The television interview continues to reach places the original broadcast didn't. None of this requires your presence to keep running. That is the point. You built something that doesn't need you to be visible to remain real. What it needs is for you to be deliberate about when you come back. And you are not ready yet. And you know the difference between not ready and done. Somewhere there is a kid with a guitar who has seen the records and done the math on whether any of this is reachable from where he is standing. He has seen the result from the outside, which is the only angle available to him. He has not seen the inside. He doesn't know about the garage or the graph paper routes, or the person who knocked on the wall and stayed until he couldn't. He doesn't know what it costs to be the last one who remembers the room. He doesn't know yet that the math is not the hardest part. He picks up the guitar. They always do.